I never thought I would own such a beautiful home at 28, but here I was, standing in front of a two-story Victorian house with a wide wraparound porch. My heart raced as the key turned smoothly in the lock, and the heavy wooden door creaked open, revealing the spacious interior. After years of hard work, this was the moment I had been waiting for. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of oak and fresh paint, a symbol of a brand new chapter in my life. But at that moment, standing there with my husband, I had no idea that this joy wouldn't last for long. My name is Olivia Carter, a financial specialist at a major investment firm in Chicago. 6 years ago, I started this job with a modest starting salary, but through hard work, I climbed the ranks and saved enough money to place a down payment on my first home. And now, after years of planning and saving, I finally owned my dream house. I squeezed my husband Jake's hand as we stood in front of our new home. He smiled, his blue eyes filled with pride as he looked at me. "You did it, Olivia. This house is amazing," he said, his voice full of sincerity. That was one of the things I loved most about Jake, his unwavering support for me. As a high school teacher with a modest income, he never felt threatened by my success. When I told him I wanted to buy the house with my own money and put it in my name, he didn't object. "You worked hard for this, you deserve it," he simply said. I knew not all men could accept that. I had heard too many stories about husbands who couldn't handle their wives earning more than them, or buying a house without their financial support. But Jake was different. He was even proud to tell his friends that his wife was an independent and strong woman. Moving into our new home was one of the happiest days of my life. As we unpacked the first few boxes in the spacious living room, I couldn't stop smiling. The house had 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a large kitchen with a marble island, and a backyard big enough for barbecues. I had made sure to put down a significant deposit so that our monthly mortgage payments wouldn't be too overwhelming. We spent our first evening in the new house planning our future. Jake and I sat on the living room floor leaning against unopened boxes, imagining how we would decorate each room. "What do you think about turning this room into a small library?" I asked, pointing at a vacant room next to the staircase. "That's a great idea," Jake nodded, "but we should also think about a nursery for the future, right?" I laughed. "You're thinking too far ahead." "Not really," he smirked. "We're building a life together, aren't we?" Looking into Jake's eager eyes, I felt my heart swell with happiness. I had a beautiful home, a loving husband, and a bright future ahead. I had no idea that just a few months later, everything I believed in would completely fall apart. Dinner at my in-laws' house was supposed to be a warm gathering to celebrate our new home. Martha and Richard Carter had always been kind to me, treating me like their own daughter since Jake and I started dating 6 years ago. They lived in a small ranch-style house on the outskirts of Chicago, simple but cozy. I had been looking forward to a pleasant evening, sharing a meal and chatting about how we planned to decorate each room in our new house. But things didn't go as I had imagined. Martha set a roasted chicken on the table, her face glowing with excitement as she looked at us. "So you two finally have a place of your own. Tell me all about it. What's it like?" I was about to speak when Jake jumped in first, his voice filled with pride. "Actually, I wanted to surprise you, Mom. I bought us a beautiful house, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious backyard, and even a modern kitchen," he beamed, his eyes shining with joy. I froze, my chopsticks nearly slipping from my fingers. A cold chill ran down my spine. What did he just say? "Oh my goodness, my son is amazing!" Marta clapped her hands, absolutely thrilled. "I knew you could do it, Richard. Did you hear that? Our boy bought a house for his family." Richard, a quiet but proud father, nodded approvingly. "Well done, son. I was worried a teacher's salary wouldn't be enough for a big house like that, but I guess I underestimated you." I turned to look at Jake, hoping this was some kind of joke. But he didn't look like he was joking. Under the table, he gently squeezed my hand, his eyes silently pleading with me not to say anything. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't want to cause a scene in the middle of dinner, especially when I saw the delight in Martha's eyes. I mustered a weak smile. "Yeah, the house is really beautiful." Jake squeezed my hand tighter, as if thanking me for staying silent. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of excitement from Jake's family. He went on and on about the home buying process, how he had saved for years to afford the down payment, and even described his choices in furniture, items that I had personally selected. I sat there, quietly pushing my food around my plate, feeling like I had been pulled into a strange alternate reality. One where I was no longer the person who had worked countless hours to buy that house. But it didn't stop there. A week later we visited my parents. I grew up in a middle-class family in downtown Chicago. My mother, Linda, was a retired accountant, and my father, Daniel, had been an engineer but now worked part-time. They were practical, straightforward people who had always taught me to be independent and earn what I wanted through hard work. That evening our family gathered around the dinner table, and my mom eagerly asked about the house. "You must be so proud, Olivia," she said with a smile, placing her hand over mine. I nodded, ready to share my journey of buying the house when Jake spoke up first. "Yes, we got an amazing house," he said, his voice just as proud as before. "I wanted to give Olivia the home she deserves, so I worked really hard to be able to buy it." The fork in my hand nearly slipped from my fingers. My mom paused, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. "What did you just say? You bought the house?" Jake smiled. "Yes, I saved for years to afford this house for our family." I turned to look at Emma, my younger sister, who was sitting across from me. A strange emotion flickered in her eyes. Was it surprise, disappointment, or jealousy? Emma had always dreamed of owning a beautiful home, but with her career still unstable, she was stuck renting a small apartment. Now, hearing that Jake had supposedly bought a big house, I could see the discomfort in her expression. I clenched my fork, feeling like I was trapped in a bizarre dream. I had hoped Jake had only lied to his own family to make them happy, but now, he was weaving this same fabricated story in front of my family as well. Should I tell the truth? I looked at Jake, catching the way his eyes flicked toward me, a silent warning. He didn't want me to ruin the image he had just built. And so, once again, I chose to stay silent. But I knew this silence wouldn't last forever. I wasn't surprised when one evening Emma called me, her voice filled with worry. "Olivia," Emma hesitated. "My job is downsizing, and I just got laid off." I was a little surprised but kept my voice steady. "Oh, do you have a plan yet?" Emma sighed. "I'm still looking, but rent doesn't wait for anyone. I can't afford my apartment anymore if I don't find somewhere else." Her voice trailed off as if waiting for me to offer a solution. I closed my eyes, already knowing exactly what she was about to ask. "Can I stay with you for a while?" I glanced at Jake, who was sitting on the couch watching the news, then let out a sigh. "I'll think about it, Emma." But before I could call her back to discuss it, my mom called first. "Olivia, Emma just called me crying. She lost her job. You have to help her. You have a big house. What's a few weeks or a few months?" And just like that, I agreed. 2 days later, Emma arrived at my house with her suitcase. The first few weeks went surprisingly well. Emma quickly became the perfect house guest. She woke up early to make breakfast for everyone, did laundry, cleaned, and even helped decorate a few corners of the house. Some days I'd come home after a long day at work to find dinner already waiting on the table. "Thank you, Emma," I said one evening, feeling relieved to have someone helping around the house. "It's nothing, sis," she smiled sweetly, as if everything she did was simply out of kindness. But then, things started to change. Emma was no longer just a temporary guest. She started acting like the house was hers. At first it was small, harmless comments. "You never organize the kitchen as neatly as I do, Olivia." Or when she handed Jake his coffee in the morning. "Here, Jake. Black coffee with just a little sugar. I remember, that's how you like it, right?" Unlike Olivia, who always makes it too sweet. I frowned but said nothing. Then, she started changing the way she dressed. At first, it was just simple tank tops and shorts, reasonable enough considering the summer heat. But then I began to notice something unusual. Emma started walking around the house in low-cut tops, tiny shorts, and sometimes, I realized she wasn't even wearing a bra. One time I walked into the kitchen and saw her standing next to Jake, leaning in close as she reached for the sugar in the cabinet. Her thin, barely there top left little to the imagination. I cleared my throat to get their attention. "Emma, could you wear something a bit more appropriate?" She shrugged, pretending not to understand. "It's just so hot, sis." Jake gave an awkward chuckle, looking slightly uncomfortable but saying nothing. One evening I came home later than usual after an important meeting. As I opened the front door, I heard laughter coming from the living room. Emma was sitting on the couch, legs propped up on the coffee table, a wine glass in hand, laughing with Jake. I narrowed my eyes. "What are you two doing?" Jake turned to me looking slightly surprised. Oh, we were just rewatching that movie you like. Emma said you'd probably want to see it again, so we figured we'd watch it first and tell you about it. I glanced at Emma, who was smirking ever so slightly. Have you had dinner yet? She asked, her tone casual, like I was the outsider. I tightened my grip on my purse, feeling that something was off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it yet, but a vague sense of unease settled deep in my chest. Something wasn't right, and I knew this was just the beginning. The business trip was supposed to last 3 days, but everything went smoother than expected and I finished my work in just 2. I called a taxi from the airport, excited to get home and surprise Jake. The contract I had just signed would bring in a significant commission, enough to help pay off a large chunk of our mortgage early. I smiled, picturing the look of surprise on Jake's face when I walked through the door. But I had no idea that what was waiting for me was a nightmare. The taxi pulled up in front of the house at 8 p.m. From the gate I sensed something was off. The lights inside were all on, and faint music drifted down from upstairs. I rolled my suitcase inside and was immediately met with a strange feeling. On the living room table there were 2 glasses of red wine, one still full, the other nearly empty. I froze. Jake wasn't the kind of man to drink alone, and that second glass? It wasn't mine. Then I saw a piece of clothing draped over the staircase railing. A red silk blouse, not mine. A wave of unease crashed into my chest, so intense that it nearly stole my breath. Gripping the handle of my suitcase tightly, I climbed the stairs, each step slow and deliberate. The music was coming from my bedroom. Our bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I could hear laughter inside, soft whispers, and a familiar giggle. My heart pounded violently against my ribs. I pushed the door open, and what I saw stopped me cold. Jake and Emma, in my bed. The sheets were tangled, their bodies wrapped around each other. Emma's blonde hair spilled across my pillow, her green eyes locked onto mine as I stood there, frozen like a statue. And then she smiled. Jake didn't. His face turned ghostly pale as he scrambled to pull the sheets over himself, sitting up in sheer panic. Olivia, I can explain. Emma, on the other hand, didn't bother covering herself. She simply stretched lazily, as if she had just woken up from a pleasant nap. I still couldn't speak, my mind went blank. It felt like someone had ripped the floor out from under me, sending me free-falling into nothingness. Emma stood up, casually picking up her red silk blouse from the floor, draping it over her shoulders. She met my gaze with a calm, almost amused expression. You're home early? Her voice was so calm, as if I were the intruder in my own home. I struggled to breathe. But not from pain. From rage. Why? I finally managed to choke out. Emma shrugged. You know, Jake is a great guy, he takes care of me. I turned to Jake, who wouldn't even look at me. A part of me wanted him to deny it, to say this was a stupid, horrible mistake. But he said nothing. Then, Emma placed a hand on her stomach. Oh, and you should probably know, she tilted her head slightly, a strange gleam in her eyes. I'm pregnant. It's Jake's. The room spun around me. I took a step back, unable to breathe. Jake's head snapped up, his face twisted in shock. What? He turned to Emma, then back to me. What the hell are you talking about? Emma smirked. You didn't know? I took a test this morning. I looked at Jake, who now looked even more shocked than I was. Clearly this was news to him too. Emma took a slow step toward me, lowering her voice into a mocking whisper. So maybe you should reconsider who actually gets to stay in this house. I stood there, silent. I had always known Emma was jealous of me. But I never imagined she would destroy my marriage just to take what I had. Now, standing in front of me, Emma wasn't my sister anymore. She was a stranger. A stranger challenging me in my own home. And I knew this war had only just begun. I stared Emma down, my breath heavy with fury. She stood there, her hand resting on her stomach, her eyes burning with arrogance. You should reconsider who gets to live in this house, she repeated, her voice completely devoid of remorse. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I laughed. A dry, bitter laugh echoed through the room. Emma frowned. What's so funny? I shook my head, wiping away my tears, not from pain but from pure rage. Emma, do you really think you can steal everything from me and then stand here claiming this house is yours? I crossed my arms, my gaze turning ice cold. Let me tell you the truth. This house was never Jake's. It never was. Emma raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? I turned to Jake, who was still sitting on the bed, his face pale and stunned. Jake, I said, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. Tell her. Tell Emma whose name is actually on the deed. Jake swallowed hard. His eyes flicked to me, then to Emma. And I saw fear in them. Jake, I repeated, this time slower, firmer. Tell her the truth. He bit his lip, then dropped his gaze. Olivia bought this house, he muttered, barely audible. Emma's forehead creased. What? Jake took a deep breath and finally admitted it. I never bought this house, Emma. Everything, the house, the car, all of it, belongs to Olivia. I saw the panic flash across Emma's face. No, that's not possible, she stammered, her voice rising. You told me. He lied, I cut in, stepping closer to her, and you were foolish enough to believe it. Emma turned to Jake, her eyes blazing. You lied to me? You told me you bought this house for our family? Jake avoided her gaze, unable to come up with another excuse. Emma's face twisted with fury. She whirled back to me, her cheeks flushed red with anger. So what? She lifted her chin, trying to regain her arrogance. You think just because your name is on the deed you can throw us out? Did you forget? I'm your sister, and this, she gestured toward her stomach, is the father of my child. We have a right to stay. I let out a cold, quiet laugh. Oh no, Emma, you two have no right to stay here. I crossed my arms, my voice so cold it even surprised me. You have exactly 1 hour to pack your things and get the hell out of my house. Jake's head snapped up, his eyes wide. Olivia, don't do this. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. I walked over to the filing cabinet, pulled out the house ownership documents that I had kept safe, and threw them onto the table in front of them. My finger landed directly on my name on the deed. Emma's mouth fell open. And here, I said, grabbing another folder and tossing it next to the first, is the receipt for the car Jake drives. I looked at them, my tone cutting. It's in my name, I paid for it. Jake was just using it. Emma turned to Jake, her voice cracking. You've been lying to me this whole time? Jake swallowed hard, unable to answer. I took a step back, crossing my arms as I looked at them. Now start packing, you have exactly 60 minutes. Emma glared at me, her eyes burning with hatred. You're going to regret this, she hissed. You're throwing your own pregnant sister out of the house. I smirked. That baby has nothing to do with me. I folded my arms tighter. But if you're not out in an hour, I'm calling the police. Emma stood there, breathing heavily, her hands clenched into fists. I turned on my heel, walking toward the door. Before slamming it shut, I said coldly, The clock is ticking, get moving. I had barely sat down after kicking Emma and Jake out when my phone started buzzing non-stop. Ma. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and answered. Olivia Carter! My mother's voice screeched so loudly that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. What have you done? I shut my eyes tighter, forcing myself to stay calm. I did what had to be done. Emma just called me sobbing. Did you really throw your pregnant sister out of the house? Do you have no conscience? I let out a bitter laugh. You're asking if I have a conscience? What about Emma? Did she have one when she slept with my husband in my own bed? My mother fell silent for a few seconds, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. But then, she continued, her voice even angrier. No matter what happened, she is still your sister, and now she's pregnant. A child is coming into this world, Olivia. Are you really heartless enough to leave your sister and your own niece or nephew out on the street? I gripped my phone tighter. She can go wherever she wants, but she's not staying in my house. And where do you expect her to go? Wander the streets while carrying a baby? Jake is the father of that child. You can't tear their family apart now. I let out a cold laugh. A family? If Jake cared so much about his family, he wouldn't have betrayed me. And if Emma truly needs a home, then maybe you should open yours and let her in. Don't be disrespectful, my mother shouted. I can't believe how selfish you are, Olivia. You're willing to destroy everything over a little pride? If you refuse to help Emma, then don't expect to be my daughter anymore. For a brief moment my throat tightened, but then I clenched my fist. "That's up to you," I said firmly. "I'm not changing my mind." And with that I hung up. I didn't waste any time making my next move. The very next morning, I called my divorce attorney. "Barbara, I want to finalize my divorce as quickly as possible." She didn't ask many questions, just requested the necessary documents and scheduled a meeting to begin the process. I knew Jake had no chance of claiming anything: the house, the car, the savings accounts. Everything was in my name. I had worked too hard for what I had, and I wasn't about to let him or Emma take a single cent from me. A few weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Jake had no legal grounds to demand anything, and he didn't even dare to fight it. After I threw them out, Jake and Emma had no choice but to move into my old bedroom at my parents' house. The thought made me laugh. They thought they had won, but in reality they had just ended up crashing in the tiny house I left behind years ago. Emma, of course, didn't miss the opportunity to play the victim. She flooded social media with long, dramatic posts about being abandoned by her own sister while pregnant. She sobbed, complained, and painted me as a cold-hearted, selfish woman who refused to help her family in a time of need. But I didn't care. I blocked Emma, Jake, and even my parents on all platforms. I didn't want to see another message from them ever again. Finally, I was free to live my own life. I renovated my home, changed the locks, bought new furniture, and erased every trace of Jake and Emma from my space. This house was mine, and no one was ever going to take it away from me again. That evening I sat in my armchair by the window, sipping a glass of wine, soaking in the absolute peace around me. I had taken back my life, and it was worth more than anything. Life isn't always fair, but we always have the power to decide how we respond. Olivia lost her husband, her sister, and even her own family, the very people who should have stood by her but instead turned their backs for the sake of someone else. But instead of letting herself be destroyed by betrayal, she chose to stand up, fight for what was hers, and move forward into a better life. Sometimes cutting off toxic relationships is the only way to truly find peace. And Olivia did exactly that. What do you think about Olivia's story? Do you agree with her decisions? If you were in her shoes, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel to hear more powerful stories about life, family, and the lessons we all need to learn.